been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
It feels incredible.
FOF Live presented by Burger and Hicks. That is Burger and Hicks. You could check them out, burgerhicks.com. That is Burger, B-E-R-G-E-R, like our own Noah Burger, not Jake Burger. And very interesting couple of days for the Marlins. Today was media day. We have Noah here to talk about all that information. The Marlins making a move. Not a major league one, but a move nonetheless with the man right behind me, Trey Mancini. We'll get to right after the introduction. We have Eli Sussman, we have Noah Berger, and we have a super subscriber joining us today, Callie Urita, I believe, from Battered Marlins fans. Callie, it's great to have you on.
Super happy to be here. Super happy to have an opportunity to support you guys. I said it when I was on with Alex the other night. You guys really set the standard for Marlins coverage. You guys all do an incredible job. So keep it up. I'm just happy to hang out with you guys tonight.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you here. First things first now to discuss the Marlins making a move, not a major league one that we have all hoped for, but could be a player that turns up to the major leagues and gives the Marlins well-needed boost offensively. Trey Mancini, who's coming off a very bad, I would say a bad season with the Cubs, a negative 1.4 WAR with the Cubbies, but he is coming off before that a very successful tenure with the Orioles, which saw, I believe, he had 28 home runs one year, 35 home runs, very powerful hitter you can have there. Defensively leaves a little bit to leave desired. But Eli, talk to me about Trey Mancini. We all know his story, him coming over cancer, leukemia, during that year, but tell me more about Trey Mancini as of late, maybe.
As of late, he is to the Cubs last season what Gene Segura was to the Marlins. That's kind of how bad it was. Things really did fall apart. They signed him to a 2-year deal. It really is a close resemblance right there. A guy who had quite a bit of major league success prior to that, cashed in a 2-year, $14 million deal, and they released him in the middle of the first year because things had got that bad. You noted his sub-replacement level performance as bad offense, as really bad defense, at not a premium position as well. And that was a team that was kind of in contention in the middle of the season. They let him go. And now Marlins pick him up on a minor league deal. It's a great value for them considering who he used to be. But you got to be discouraged, or, we have low expectations for this one because of how much he struggled last year. He struck out much more than he had traditionally. He didn't hit for as much power as he used to. That's a bad combination when you're a first base, corner outfield, DH guy. And he has split time pretty evenly between each of those three right there, even before coming to the Cubs. So the Marlins buying low on him, and I'll show in a minute. You can look at this one a couple of different ways. For his career overall, he's been pretty productive and not all that different from guys that we're pretty familiar with. He's never been an all-star, but you mentioned his 35 home run year. He was kind of close to that at his peak. So this is a guy that, the dream is he could be an everyday player moving forward, kind of like what he used to be. And the downside is that he might not break camp. It might be just very obvious that he is cooked, that he is more of the same from what happened last year. This is the highest profile minor league signing so far. I think if he took this deal, it's because he feels there's a path to make this team. And I see his viewpoint from that. It wouldn't take a whole lot for him to sneak onto this roster somehow. Just, you got to have the low initial expectations.
Yeah. Callie, same to you with Trey Mancini. A guy, before getting traded to Houston, he was very thought after during that deadline. He was one of the bigger names traded during that deadline, a name that multiple teams were striving for. Houston was looking for someone to help their playoff run. He ended up winning a World Series there. Didn't really have that productive second half to the year, but still was a major name there. Again, Eli mentioned $14 million contract. What is Trey Mancini? What can he provide for the Marlins? Like right now, do you see him filling that spot as a first baseman? Do you see him at all getting some time there, or is this a guy that who might go to another team come opening day?
It's tough to say because it's easy to look at like the numbers he had pre-illness, pre-cancer, and he was a solid, very productive ball player, and not an all-star by any stretch, but not a liability. Fairly reliable, fairly durable. And then obviously everything happened, and then the drop-off has been pretty significant, unfortunately. So it's a low risk, high reward. I mean, it costs almost nothing to bring him into camp and to see if he can take up a spot. He's a first base guy now. He's been able to kind of hide in the outfield a few times in his career too. So maybe he can provide some options there. My expectations aren't high, but depth is an issue here. If he can provide something, then fantastic. But again, if we have to shake hands and part ways, then it wasn't a big risk. It was never a big investment. So.
And with Trey Mancini as well, we're looking here between Avi, Jorge Soler. Noah, what do you like about Trey Mancini? We're looking his stats. Let's look at more towards Avi there, because it's very similar in terms of who has maybe the most green, who's the most the better numbers there. You look at Trey Mancini with better numbers in terms of almost everything, hitting, batting average, on base, slugging. And then you have Avi, who's, of course, more power hitter with the home runs, who drive in more people, who steal more bags, and again, will play more plate appearances. So how do you compare him to Avi? Is this similarly the same player, just $50 million less?
I don't think it's really fair to compare these guys at these points in their careers and what they're being brought in to do. Avi was brought in to be an everyday guy to hit for power, provide run support and everything. Trey Mancini is being brought in as a role player and to fill in gaps in lineups throughout the season. It's you're comparing apples to oranges. Comparing him to Soler is not. It's not fair at this point in his career. He's coming off of cancer. He's not going to be at the production level that he was before. But he can provide a clubhouse presence. He can provide a great mentality and all of that. And okay, he can help you out on the field. But I just don't really see that as the main reason he's being brought in. He's being brought in as a role player, as someone to back up. He's not. Josh Bell is your starting first baseman. So, and you have DH. You have DH options. He's just there as a backup. So I don't really think it's fair to compare in these situations. And I just would also like to point out, when you first brought up the picture of him, I totally 100% thought it was a picture of Ian Kinsler. Because I swear they are identical.
Oh, you muted, Eli.
Eli, you're muted.
I'll show you that in about 15 seconds, the comparison. I don't really, not really seeing it.
You gotta find the right picture of Ian.
Okay, I got these recent pictures of both of them right here. There's a bit of an age difference, of course. All right, let's take a look. Trey Mancini, Ian Kinsler. What do we think?
With the beard.
Yeah, with the beard.
You place a beard on
Ian. Had the scruff, it was there.
Yeah, when I saw Kinsler in person and he had the scruff,
yeah,
definitely 100%.
Okay.
Not terrible.
All right. Not important.
It's all right. But going back to Trey Mancini, what's his ceiling with the Marlins? Can he get double-digit home runs? Is this a guy that...
Well, I don't think he's going to play long enough to get double-digit
You don't think so?
home runs unless someone gets hurt.
Here's a better question for you guys. Does he make the opening day roster?
No.
No?
I think he does. I think he might.
If I had to guess, I do think he does. I think it will take an injury, but there are almost always some injuries during spring training. It could be like it's really 5 players that come to mind that he's connected with. It's all the corner outfielders. It's Brian De La Cruz and it's Jesus Sanchez. It's Avi, and it's also these corner infield. Well, these first base candidates, Josh Bell and Jake Berger. Like if any of them get hurt, then you can move around the pieces in such a way that it would make sense. It is still up to Mancini to perform and to kind of look like a viable player in spring. Like that's the important part. That's a total unknown at this stage. But yeah, that is. Let me get this Marlins pick back because I like that one. There we go. So I would think I put it like 65%, a combination of being glass half full as to how he'll look in spring training, and also the likelihood that somebody won't quite make it. He's in a situation people need to understand. When you're a tenured major league player that signs a minor league deal, you have opt-outs really early. You have one that's almost at the start of the year, and then you can do it every month in the minors too. You can do it on May 1st, and you can do it on June 1st, and maybe July 1st as well. Like if you're stuck at AAA and you're not accustomed to it, you can leave and think
like
that
Jose
you might
Iglesias.
path. Jose Iglesias is another. That's a weird example because he stayed originally with the Marlins and then he kind of disappeared. He didn't go to AAA, and then he opted out without ever actually playing in AAA. That was kind of a weird one, but it is the same contract type as Iglesias last year, where you think he came here because he saw a path to making the team, and so guarantee he would. But even if he doesn't, maybe there's a scenario that he sticks around a little bit in AAA and waits for his turn. Garrett Hampson's, I don't think he had quite the same contract, but Garrett Hampson last year, he didn't make the opening day roster. It took like 3 days. Noah was there when Joey Wendell got hurt in batting practice, and all of a sudden Hampson
rough. That was a rough week.
I miss him.
I think that same week, didn't Arias step on a ball? No, that was later in the season.
I think so.
Something else happened that week was somebody else got injured. And it was just like, what is going on?
Hampson was a success story in terms of a minor league contract. No one thought he would have that type of year that he had with the Marlins, and end up giving him a major league contract with the Royals. Could be something that Mancini's also looking for. And before we get to our next topic, last maybe thought with Mancini, again with the first baseman archetype there, someone kind of like Yuli Gurriel. This an improvement from Yuli. Again, difference in age there. You have more power with Trey Mancini, but you're taking off some of the defense for some of that offense. Is this an improvement from Yuli, or are they almost maybe the same level in terms of players coming in camp and filling out that backup first baseman role?
Well, LMF brought that up, and I think that in all seriousness, that is the better comp than Avi or Soler, because you're bringing him in and you're hoping that he's going to be a good role player. And Gurriel, the first half of the season, he was kind of like exactly what they were looking for in terms of doing that. And then in the second half, he totally cratered, and people were saying, get him off the team, get Troy Johnston in here. And all in all, that helped the team overall.
I also think
Yuli was a net positive over the course of the year.
I think, by the way, in the second half of the season, after taking a ball to the face in Boston, I think Yuli was dealing with a concussion the remainder of the season.
It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, with Mancini, I think you do have more power numbers there, perhaps. But also, there are some question marks that we have to fill in terms of bench, because again, like Hampson is gone, Wendell is gone. You still have to replace the Soler power numbers somehow, some way. I don't know if Mancini gets there, obviously, or between him and Avi get there, probably not. But I think he's a guy that has a good chance to make the roster, just because maybe lack of options, lack of like real true depth here. And we don't know how some of these young guys are going to perform in spring training. How is a Johnston going to perform? How is Victor Mesa or any of the other guys we might be looking at as bats off the bench options?
And with Yuli, I think he can get another chance to play. I believe so. Eli, he's playing for Cuba on Monday against the Apollos, the Houston Apollos. If you want to see, I believe Soler is going to be in action. He might take an at bat or so. Yuli Gurriel is going to be there. You're going to have a whole bunch of Cuban major leaguers there, and some minor leaguers. I believe Victor Mesa Jr. might be there.
Yeah, because they were supposed to be training for this tournament, this God, I gotta get the name right. It's not happening, so maybe I don't.
Yeah.
but
The Intercontinental
Intercontinental Series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intercontinental turn.
So I did it was an exhibition match
Forget
Monday at Marklight Field at UM. So if you want to go there, check out Yuli. Tell him if he wants to come back to the Fish. But yeah, that's there for Trey Mancini again. Just a minor league deal, no major league stuff there.
What I
with
wanted
the
to
Marlins
show
so
now
far.
is that where they stand on this non-roster invitee situation, because we got a kind of full picture, mostly full picture now about
Mhm.
what this is going to be like. We have these 9 guys. Christina DiNicola
Who's
reported.
Elvis Alvarado?
That's a new one. That's a new one that she put in her newsletter this morning. I encourage people to subscribe to that if you're interested. He's a hard-throwing reliever who was good in winter ball, and yeah, we'll find out if he's the next Huascar Brazoban. That's kind of what they're hoping for with him. These other ones were reported. Jose Devers, for nobody cares about this, but he technically became a minor league free agent, and then they signed him to a new deal, before he could actually leave to keep him in the organization. So he's around for one more year. He's only 24, even though he's been around forever, even though he was acquired in the Stanton trade. So he's still here. So aside from those, then you fill it out with the internal guys, the other non-roster prospects that either have been a lot of them have been in spring training before, like Will Banfield, like Troy Johnston, and maybe there could be some sexy surprises. I think the most bold decision potentially could be on Noble Meyer because he's the consensus top prospect in the organization. It's not uncommon for a new first-round pick to just hang around the big league team at the start of spring training. I'll be curious if Noble gets what would be just a ceremonial invite to spring, but we should have that full list very soon. Some teams
Would he be part of the? Wouldn't Noble be part of the spring breakout game?
Oh yeah, well that's for sure, and that's going to be a new wrinkle. So that's a lock that he'll appear in that for, I assume, a single inning in the middle of March. So the question is what the full list of guys in late February is that are there for full squads. But that list is always like 60 something total guys between the 40-man roster, the free agents that you take a chance on, and then prospects in your system that you put up there.
Yeah. Noah's old friend, David Smeltzer, Trey Mancini, Jose Devers.
On his name.
Jose Devers, who's still only 18 years old. Oh, I'm kidding.
Yeah, he still looks only 18 years old.
You can't go on without talking about Jonathan Davis.
Oh, I mean, we'll get into Jonathan Davis. I mean, do you have anything to bring up besides him coming back from injury? Provided such a spark plug for the Fish that fans were really disappointed when it turned out he wasn't going to come back. That the team, I believe, DFA'd, released and whatnot. But him coming back, everyone came up in arms. And could he provide something also for the Marlins? Could we see him at some point, maybe in the middle of the season? Does Jonathan Davis get back to what he did?
He's your Jazz Chisholm insurance policy, as he was last year. If Jazz gets hurt, you're going to see Jonathan Davis out there every day. It's as simple as that. He's your backup center fielder.
Yeah. So let's go from that to our next topic. Let's talk a little bit about the media day from today, and then eventually we'll go into Marlins looking for shortstops and maybe a little bit of the Hall of Fame talk. But Noah, you were there for Marlins Media Day. Tell us some of the highlights that were there, the players coming back, maybe some players that weren't there, players that were there. Your takeaway from Marlins Media Day.
We only got 8 players to talk to. We did see Sandy there, but we didn't talk to him. And they brought 8 guys over to us. Everyone else was either not there yet or had already gone to the Bally stuff. And we were only there for 2 hours today. And we spoke to Josh Bell, Jake Berger, Andrew Nardi. We spoke to Ryan Weathers, De La Cruz and Sanchez. De La Cruz was walking around with a little point and shoot disposable film camera, taking pictures of everything and anything that moved. The Sanchez and De La Cruz did a little bit of their interviews in English, which was really cool to see. It was pretty much just what you expect to hear from guys going into a season after an appearance in the playoffs. We want to get back to the playoffs. We We want to get that. We want to feel that again. We want to get back to where we were. We feel strongly that we can do this, and it's the standard stuff. But you can't help but start to get a little excited about the season coming up. A lot of guys are going to be at the majority of the 40 man's going to be at FanFest tomorrow.
Mhm.
And Skip and Peter are going to talk, and then Caroline's going to talk tomorrow. Everyone's going to be there tomorrow. And you can get your tickets at marlins.com/fanfest. I think that's the right URL.
I don't know if you asked this, but are some of these guys like actually leaving town after FanFest and going back because of that gap between?
I don't think so. They were Nick Fortes was saying that he's happy that he's here as everyone trickles in to start their workouts and everything. And actually, we were informed that their report day is actually the 14th. Their first workout is the 15th.
Right. Okay.
But their report date is the 14th.
There was some confusion about that.
All the physicals and everything.
Supposed to be the 14th, and then MLB sent out the press releases that said first workout is the 15th.
Their first official open to all media workout will be the 15th.
Okay.
The report date and the Cool Kids Club will be the 14th.
No, were there any issues with players entering the country? I remember that happened one time with Brazaban. Are the Marlins experiencing anything like that, or is everything?
I'd have to ask. I don't know. I would assume there's going to be. There always is. I think they're going to try and get guys earlier. It seems like they're trying to get guys in earlier for FanFest. I know Yuri and Edward Cabrera are back. You saw Pepito picked them up last night. And yeah, but I'll definitely ask about that and see if that's an issue. But that's more of a question for the report date, because then you'll actually find out. But there are still guys that probably aren't in yet and won't be in until the report date.
Myself. I'm gonna do a quick quiz for people watching. If anybody can name all 7 players on here, which is fairly easy for us, I think. But for anybody watching, if you can name the 7 Marlins players on here, just put in the chat.
In the chat, you want to
go left to right.
A nice shout out.
Yeah, it's a mix of it's a really odd combination of some high profile guys and then some
lettuce. Look at the lettuce.
Yeah, the curls are
oh my god.
All the guys that are on the 40-man
extra points if you get the man in the middle. Extra points.
that's some sort of executive from PNC Bank. So this was on Wednesday night where they roped these guys in to do a get together with their sponsors to make them happy.
A night on the diamond with PNC Bank.
Oh man.
Yeah. But yeah, let me play a couple clips.
Whoever said here. Watson, nope.
Because I think the most interesting development might be, well, I don't know. I don't know if any of these are super interesting, but Andrew Nardi talking about his third pitch coming along, his splitter.
What was the thought process behind adding the splitter?
I've always thrown a changeup, which kind of changed the grip a tiny bit, but it made it a little bit more movement. But overall, I think if I can actually implement it in my pitches this year, it can only benefit me, I hope. But overall, just this year, or this offseason, I've just been kind of same thing as last year. Throw a lot of bullpens, those strikes, work on all my pitches. So.
The grip inspired by anybody's, or?
No, just honestly, my other changeup I had was the horseshoe one direction, and now I just flipped it to the other direction and worked out better.
So I do. Nobody is going to remember this. I guarantee you, there's 0 people that remember this. But another pitcher that talked like that entering last year about refining his off-speed pitch from a changeup to a splitter and being really excited about it was Matt Barnes.
Yep,
Matt Barnes went out of his way to say, I need to evolve as a pitcher.
He backtracked on that first week of the season.
I've been a 2-pitch guy my whole career. I got now something to throw guys off. This will he seemed really thoughtful about it and excited about it. Then he only threw it like a handful of times the entire year, and obviously didn't pitch super well even when he was healthy. And then he got hurt even before the middle of the year. So I'd say the majority of the time when people bring up changes to their pitch mix and stuff, even if they follow through on it, it doesn't mean just because you're trying something new doesn't mean it's actually going to make a positive difference. But I'm encouraged to see it with Nardi. This is something that did stick out about me because I watched him as a prospect, and what made him really exciting is that his changeup was very effective at times in the minors as a third pitch. This year, really early on, I should say last year in 2023, early on in the season, he totally ditched his changeup. Like there was a drop dead date, maybe in the end of April, and that was before he totally took off. And once he totally stopped throwing the changeup altogether and became only fastball slider, he was on the short list of very best lefties in all of baseball. It was really on another level once he totally stopped even messing around with his off-speed pitch. So it's not always more is better, but yeah, I'm intrigued by that because definitely from watching last year, he didn't have confidence in that changeup. And if he sees a path to somehow be better than he was last year, and that was a high bar he set for himself, this is one way that maybe he becomes even better.
I think what Nardi really needs to do is bring the braids back.
I asked him, he said, heck no.
Oh, that's a shame.
Ooh.
I'm out on Nardi then. Ship him off.
Hey, the Rays are looking for high leverage relievers, so just bring the Marlins Bobby Wood and everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, here's if you're doing it at home, wondering who's who: DLC Billy, George Soriano, Yuri, PNC Bankman, Eddie, Xavier Edwards, Stephen Okert, and Mr. Peyton Burdick. Last thing on Andrew Nardi. We saw having a breakout season last year, and with Nardi again, I mentioned ceiling with another player earlier. With Nardi, is his ceiling all-star level caliber? Could he be in line? I don't want to say for a contract extension or at least some type of major league money if he could continue what he's doing. Does he have that capability to be the top of his position come 2025, rest of 2024?
He was awfully close last year. What made him so special last year is that he stepped up in the most important situations, and especially with stranding runners on base, which made him like just overall as impactful as any setup man in baseball. In terms of overall stuff, I'll have to pull this up. The big concern last year was his platoon splits were still pretty significant, where he was dominant against lefties. They hit 158 against them and against him, and righties hit like 244, and there's a 175 point gap in OPS there. Like it's still significant, and that goes back to why he still thinks it's important to toy around with his off-speed pitch, because he realizes that there's more room to grow against righties, to be equally consistent against both those sides. So I mean, that's the big question with a lot of guys in that bullpen, is being equally effective even if you're at a platoon disadvantage. I think it's a little premature to say that he's going to be an elite guy. Mm-hmm. If he does have a comparable season, then that is one of those rare relievers where you think about a long-term deal, where they're relatively inexpensive. But if you just trust so much in a guy's foundation, if you're like, as long as this guy's healthy, he's going to be above average. Like there's some value in throwing a few $1,000,000 every year for the next 4 or 5 years on him just to raise the ceiling of your pen. The Marlins haven't done that. I cannot think of very many examples in Marlins history where they've extended a young reliever for a bunch of years. The most recent reliever extension they've done of any kind was Richard Blyer. That was a different case, and that did not age particularly well. Yeah, so it's unusual to commit to those guys. It is exciting, though, for a guy that, if people remember correctly, he was a very late round draft pick out of nowhere. At this point, to already get one mostly full season the way he pitched, that is already that's one of the biggest wins that they've had in the draft these past few years, where there have been so many high profile screw ups. Like that is one that DJ Spillick got right, is finding him in the later rounds and having him be like this pretty legit contributor. So I would say that the rest is kind of gravy. If he somehow finds another level, that'd be pretty spectacular. But you don't want to be too spoiled by that.
Yeah. So right at the 30-minute mark, we'll head into a break. Eli, do we have a flipped fish?
No flip fish
All right.
on this one, but yeah, on most episodes we do
No,
that.
no flip fish, but do stay tuned. After this short break, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Hall of Fame class. Gary Sheffield just missing out, and then Miami Marlins looking at some free agent shortstops. Stay tuned. This is FOF Live presented by Berger and Hicks.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
And coming back from this break, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Hall of Fame class, the new 4, including Jim Leland, getting into the Hall of Fame class. The 3 players elected: Adrian Beltre, Todd Helton, Joe Mauer. Billy Wagner fell just 5 votes short, and Gary Sheffield falls off the ballot after only receiving 63% of the votes. Before we head into Chef, let's talk about the 3 men that are going to be inducted to the Hall of Fame with Beltre, Helton, Mauer. Callie, which of these 3 guys do you like the most? What do you think of the class?
I mean, I think Beltre. I think everyone's pretty much in agreement. Like that one's not surprising by any stretch. I mean, just absolutely stellar career. He checks all the boxes. You know, absolutely incredible in a bad defensively. 3,000 hits, the whole song and dance. Helton felt long overdue. And again, another guy checks all the boxes, hit the home runs, same team, all the things that the voters love. And then Joe Mauer was, I mean, the numbers long term, beginning to end, aren't like super sexy, but the accolades and like the pure dominance that he had for probably like a 5 or 6 year stretch there were just incredible. I mean, to win 3 batting titles, an MVP, and yeah, he didn't. I think he only played like 900 games or something like that at catcher. But Joe Mauer was I don't think anyone would doubt that he was probably the best catcher in the game for a stretch there. So I think they're all deserving. I don't have an issue with any of them being in there. Obviously, really cool that Leland got in too. Mm-hmm. I think all of them are deserving. I do think there's 3 guys that should be in, but I know we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, you mentioned Joe Mauer, 921 games as a catcher, so less than 1,000, but just so dominant with the bat. I actually have a Joe Mauer shirt right here. I'm a big fan of his. Just how dominant he was at the catcher position. Just to win batting titles, MVP as a catcher is one of those things that has not happened in a long time and may not happen for another very long time with Joe Mauer. And again, Todd Helton. Eli, let me ask you with Helton, are you one of those guys that factor in Coors Field in terms of someone like a Todd Helton? Did that hurt him with his numbers at Coors Field, or was just he, someone that, that just had to play in Coors Field, plays in Coors Field, he put up those numbers, just putting up in front of him, or do you kind of maybe devalue it just a bit?
He was special enough to overcome like those. That is part of the conversation always, but he was on such a short list of best hitters in baseball for, that a really big 6, 7, 8 year stretch during his late 20s and early 30s. He was so consistently good during his prime. Only players like better than him were ones that we find out in retrospect were using PEDs. Really, like he was in that really select company. It was those guys. I guess it was Pujols as well. He was overshadowed by a couple other first basemen in the National League at his same position that maybe were a little bit better. That's there's only so much you can control. That who else is also active at your time in your league that unfortunately probably made him underrated during his career, but in hindsight it was pretty special. The one thing I was on the fence with him about is just how he tailed off later in his career. I more vividly remember the second half of his career than his first half, just because of my age. And like during that second half of his career, he was a bad contract. He signed the super long-term deal deep into his 30s, and like the Rockies were Rockies fans are pretty anxious about that because he missed some time due to injuries. I think he even had one DUI during his career, then another one after his career. I'm not entirely sure about that, but his power kind of went away during that second half of his career as well. So it's just a question of like, how good was he good enough in his peak to like make him deserving? And in my case, all things considered, I think he was. So I think he clears the bar. I'm with Callie that like there are more guys here that are deserving than the ones that actually got in. You can't complain about a three-man class, especially when there's also a non-player, a fourth guy, and Jim Leland going in. I think that's going to be fun. It's going to be a really fun weekend for the people going out there. All guys that are worth celebrating for different reasons.
And again, with Joe Mauer, did it affect you guys at all in terms of him, maybe how long he played and maybe his age? I remember hearing on MLB Network that he's the second youngest player to be inducted to the Hall of Fame right after Sandy Koufax, going in at I believe 40 years old, retired around 35. Does that maybe hinder at all, maybe when you're looking at a guy, or maybe with Joe Mauer, the length of how much they played, only retiring at 35 and just being so young? Does that hurt at all in terms of length of a career or age?
I mean, it has some similarities to Helton too, where Helton, like even in a bigger way, his contract became such a stain on like his whole reputation the second half of his career. It's not his fault that he played at an MVP level and then they at the perfect time and he cashed out, and he tried to be effective in his new role even once he left catching, trying to overcome concussion issues. And unfortunately, didn't quite live up to that contract the way that he wanted to. The teams around him weren't particularly good. It's the same thing where like his peak in this first half of his career was so special that it outweighed any of those other noise that kind of changed the narrative during the second half of his career. Yeah, with him, you definitely knew it at the time that it was something historic, the way that he was playing as an all-around catcher during the peak of his career. With him, it was easier to see. Nobody was kind of lost in all that. It is pretty sad that, he couldn't go longer in his career, especially not longer at catcher. It's a reminder just in general with the catcher position that's kind of why it's underrepresented in the Hall, because these guys, it's impossible. It's almost impossible, you could say, to like have these extremely long careers while playing that position. Physically, it is so demanding, and mentally, it is so taxing as well. To do good at both is pretty special. It's still a few years away from having this conversation about Yadier Molina and even about Buster Posey as well. Posey being one that he also had a shorter career than you would like. And with Yachty, he was somebody that his peak of his career wasn't quite as amazing, but he was around for so long. He was an exception. One of those few guys that did last so long, forever. It happened to be correlated with winning teams. Like, that's a position overall that I think Marlins fans in particular do not take it for granted what it's like to have a good catcher, because once you don't have one, you don't know when you're going to find another one. The Marlins have been in the catcher wilderness for 5 years and counting at this point. So they'd be so grateful for a few years of somebody like Mauer, and they'd be willing to live with, the back end of that as well.
With Mauer, only 900 games catching, he retired at 35, but the peak was so sustainable while it happened. Again, it wasn't a question as to he was, if not the best, he was one of the best of, best catchers in the game at the time. And the power numbers weren't crazy, but the average numbers are stupid. The OPS is stupid.
Yeah.
The RBI numbers are stupid. Like that's a guy that, to me, like, people were barking about like, oh, he didn't catch a lot, he fell off or whatever. It's like, yeah, but the peak was really, really high, man. Like that, it's really, really hard to ignore that. And I think the conversation we're having now about Joe Mauer is a conversation we're going to be having about Buster Posey in a couple years. But Posey has the benefit of winning several World Series, being on a few teams. So it's all a balancing act, man. At the end of the day, unfortunately, a lot of this is just popularity contest. It's who the writers like the most, and we're kind of staring it in the face with this year, and obviously with some of the omissions from before.
Yeah, did just right there, Beltre, another guy. It seemed like with him, he had like 2 different careers. His first 10 and the last 10, just really dominant last 10 of the years, getting to 500 home runs. But let's talk about the 2 guys right after them, which is most intriguing for most fans, including Marlins fans here in the community. You got Billy Wagner, who just fell 5 votes short. Eli was telling those 5 riders, do not put them in, do not. And then you have Gary Sheffield, who fell very far away from the 75% threshold in his 10th year, only 63.9%. Let's talk a little bit about Billy before we can go very extended talk about Gary Sheffield. Eli, 5 votes short for Billy Wagner. What made those 5 riders, you think, not put him in the Hall?
I think it's the same things that I mentioned. Well, it's a couple of different things. There's some that kind of just like me, that single inning relievers don't have quite the same impact as other positions over the course of their careers. They just not on the field as much. If they were fit to be starters, then they would be starting pitchers and they'd go a lot more innings and they'd have a lot more value given to their teams over the course of their careers. And Wagner is somebody who was exclusively reliever all the way through. He was one of the very best ever at what he did. Mm-hmm. And so you could like chew out the guys who voted against him, but nearly 74% voted for him because of that, because he simply is one of the best to ever do it. And he was so consistent through the years and through several different teams at doing that in those high leverage situations. So I don't take his like accomplishments for granted, but at the same time, it's just the realities of the role where relievers not really comparable to everyday players, and it's not really comparable to starting pitchers in my mind. And I guess the other side of that is he didn't do little things outside of his control that didn't go his way during his career. In the playoffs, he only got a few opportunities there, didn't do well, and was never part of a big World Series celebration or a deep run in that way. So he didn't have that in his favor the way that some other Hall of Fame relievers have, those enduring moments of them in the biggest spots to push them through. And sometimes the fact that a player changes teams several other points during his career, this is probably a bigger deal with Sheffield than with Wagner, but it's difficult to picture a guy with one particular team, then that sometimes hurts them as well, where you don't have, especially when it comes to campaigning, even though these writers say, they go through their process and they take it very seriously, they can be swayed by outside noise, by third parties campaigning for certain guys. And when you have players that aren't totally synonymous with one organization, then you don't have like all the research and all the clamoring. It's not quite as loud in their favor as it is with some other guys. Even so, I think history says that every single guy in Wagner's spot, as it shows, his 9th year on the ballot, he's got 1 more to go. Everybody that gets this close and still has eligibility remaining, they get in the following year. So ultimately, in his case, no hard feelings. He's going to be part of the class of 2025.
Yeah. Billy was incredible. I mean, he was like a Cy Young finalist like twice in his career, which is absolutely insane for a closer. But I think with the baseball hall, like getting in as a closer is almost like getting into like the NFL Hall of Fame as like a kicker. Like you really have to do something like absolutely incredible, absolutely substantial to get in. And Billy was dominant when he was around. Shared the spotlight with Mariano a little bit and a couple other guys in his heyday. But I mean, I think like 73 is harsh. It sucks being 5 votes away, but like Eli said, I think he gets it. But Billy was absolutely incredible. I do think he's a guy that deserves to get it. I think he will get it probably in his last year in the ballot.
Yeah. So we could take these last 10, 15 minutes or so, talk about the man again, right under him, Gary Sheffield, falling very far behind, not even getting 65%, barely not far away from 70%. Callie, with Gary Sheffield not reaching the Hall of Fame, what do you think, what do you think of him not making it? Are the Marlins ever going to get a Hall of Famer? Are we ever going to see a player in the Hall with a Marlins cap?
I mean, in our lifetime, maybe not. I don't know. But the thing is, it's you look at the history of the Marlins, and the guy like Hanley's eligible next year, but Hanley's not going to get in. Like who is there? Who's going to be the guy that gets their plaque emblazoned wearing a Marlins? I don't know who that is. I have no clue. I couldn't pick a guy. Like the only argument maybe, and I doubt it, is like if Stanton finishes off strong and puts up Hall of Fame numbers, like does it become a conversation if he wears a Marlins? I don't know. Hopefully we have a guy like Sandy and Yuri that stick around for 15 years, and 30 years from now we're watching them put the hat on, put the jacket on, and stuff like that. But Gary being left out is an absolute crime. It is a crime against baseball. So
I do think that agreeing with some of the comments here, that if Stanton does get in, I think it'd be more likely as a Marlin than as a Yankee. The weird position he's in is that he's not quite has a Hall of Fame career to this point. He's got to add on to it. And is he going to add on to it as a Yankee? Are they going to release him and he catches on somewhere? Like, is there some crazy scenario where he does come back to the Marlins late in his career as like a Andre Dawson type and like adds to his counting stats at the very end? Yeah, I think there's still a possibility he gets in, and he'd be like some of these other players we covered, where at his very best, he was amazing. And he had these, it wasn't just like production wise, but he had that kind of intangible thing where he hit the ball harder than like anybody ever has. And the spectacle of that really meant something to people, especially to Marlins fans. But I think even outside of that, people understood that is special and that should be recognized and should be remembered for a while. Because of that, I would still lean towards him not quite getting in, but hopefully he's coming off a really bad year. I do like to remind people that not to overreact to one really bad year. Like he's had his moments with the Yankees. That tells you he still has something left in the tank, because he still has 4 years left on that contract. He's going to get opportunities to continue playing. It's just a question of whether the body holds up, and that's just an unanswerable question with him, unfortunately. And aside from him, it's going to be a really long wait. Yeah. Ichiro is going to go in next year, we anticipate, and there'll be maybe a little bit of Marlins recognition in there, but he's obviously not going to wear a Marlins cap and be immortalized that way. But that'll bring up some nice memories and be notable weekends because of that. I think Steve Cishek will actually have to appear on a ballot. I think that because of all the years he's spent in baseball, that he might sneak through onto a ballot. Like, for example, let me just make sure I look at all the weirdos that somehow got onto this one.
There's some strange ones.
Yeah, there are some.
Russell Martin is on it, I believe, next year.
Brandon Phillips was another one that he was good,
Brandon
but it's
Phillips.
like, why is this guy on the ballot? Like, I don't know.
In terms
Tulo
of who
is
the
on it
next one,
year.
yeah, in terms of who the next one is going to be, you'd have to say that. Of course, Miguel Cabrera, a few years away from going in. It's the same situation, of course. As it's a little bit, it'll be even more meaningful though than Ichiro, because you did win that World Series in Miami. So that'll be a really great day when he gets his turn. In terms of guys going in as a Marlin, I think Sandy Alcantara. Sandy Alcantara is the one that maybe has a path, depending on what he looks like on this other side of his surgery. He'll still be 28 when he comes back, and he's had several great seasons, including one pretty historic one. It is the bar for starting pitchers is going to come down a little bit, because all guys get hurt nowadays. It's not uncommon. It's not a death knell in your career when you miss an entire year like this. So he could still have a decade ahead of him as a special starter. How much of that is in Miami, we don't know. He's going to be under contract for team control for 3 more years, starting in 2025 and beyond. Will they be able to find common ground on a deal that goes beyond that if he bounces back? Probably not. That's ultimately what's frustrating from the Marlins fan experience, is that these guys, they don't have Marlins lifers. All these guys at some point leave, and it's almost via trade. It's almost always leaving before they had to leave as well, which is really frustrating. He's a guy that at least there's a path there where he got off to a really good start before getting hurt. He'll still have time to reestablish himself as an ace even before his contract runs out, and then we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, it is frustrating to feel kind of left out of the same kind of Hall of Fame conversations that a lot of other fan bases get to have.
Yeah. Yeah, and with Chef, it's almost a travesty that he's not in the Hall of Fame. Over 500 home runs, has the World Series ring. What is the detrimental case that the writers did not want to put him on? Is it just the amount of teams that he played for? I mean, he went from team to team, signed, get traded. I mean, that's sports. That's a business there. But what do you guys believe for him to not get into the Hall? It seems like you have over 500 home runs. You're certain at least a lock to get it, especially with the accolades that Chef has, and how iconic he was to baseball. I know they don't really count it, but the stance and everything with it, you can't really have late 90s baseball without Gary Sheffield's name in there. Just what was so detrimental that the writers just did not want to put him in there?
This is one of those things that I can really go on like a real tangent about, because I am like passionately hateful towards the Hall of Fame writers. There's two things that don't hold water that they're holding up against Gary Sheffield for me. The first thing is the amount of teams he played on. Ricky Henderson played on 9 different teams. Plenty of pitchers, plenty of guys played on plenty of teams. That one doesn't hold water for me. There's, even Nolan Ryan played on like 4 or 5 teams. Randy Johnson played on a bunch of teams. Pedro Martinez played on a bunch of teams. That argument doesn't make any sense to me. And then the PED allegations also doesn't hold water for me because he never actually failed a test, right? Like that's not something that ever happened. It was just allegations. David Ortiz failed a test. He's in the Hall of Fame. Pudge and Piazza both have PED allegations. They're both in the Hall of Fame. And not to mention that those are just the guys. Jeff Bagwell is currently Hall of Fame. He came out and publicly said, yeah, I took steroids. So the whole argument about PEDs doesn't hold water for me because there's already guys in the Hall that did that. And aside from that, and it's the same thing with Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Alex Rodriguez, and it's going to be the same thing for Gary Sheffield. Like, fine, if that's the carrot you want to dangle in front of them, fine, but you still have to acknowledge who they were to the game. Like, if you want to put like the steroid era or whatever in the Hall of Fame, you can do that. But again, like the two things that they're pushing against Gary Sheffield, it doesn't make sense to me because there's already guys in the Hall of Fame. There's already a precedent for guys with those kind of, things about them that are already in the Hall. They're already being celebrated. So why is Gary Sheffield different? And it goes back to, again, like the whole popularity contest, the whole, there's a plethora of reasons that, I'm not the only one that's vocal about this. There's a million people, and most baseball fans probably feel the same way, that there's an unfair and implicit bias towards who the writers push into the Hall and who they don't vote for, and unfortunately, I think Gary's right now running into being a victim of that.
Yeah. Just to answer Eric's question here, the Tampa Bay Rays, as Sean actually answered it for him. Yeah, the Rays also do not have a player in their cap because they're even a newer franchise than the Marlins are. They could have a pretty long wait before they get there. It seems like maybe Wander Franco was just starting off on that kind of path, and then yikes.
The one that might have an argument for the Rays down it's going to be close. Like Evan Longoria, maybe.
He was great for a while. The peak was
like he might be like a Hall of Very good guy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I had James Shields this year. I don't know if you want to count
James
him.
Shields was on the ballot.
James Shields was on the ballot.
He unfortunately, I think he had 0 votes.
Was David Price on the ballot? Not on the ballot.
No, he's not eligible yet. And I think he's going to fall a little bit short.
Or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but both him and Evan Longoria are kind of in the same bucket where they had Hall of Fame peaks. I don't think it was quite special enough to get them in. So those are guys that will get some votes, but I have a hard time matching either of them getting in. The Nationals, well, they're newer than anybody if you exclude the Expos stuff. And
they'll probably have Harper though.
Yeah. We do. I do want to remind people that FanFest is tomorrow, and we got this spicy tip from Billy Gill about uniform updates being revealed tomorrow. Let's see. We just got an email. Let me go through it live. This isn't great stream content, just from what the Marlins are saying about what to expect.
Yes,
from coverage. Begins at 4 p.m. and free tickets and complimentary parking as long as you can find a spot. So even though it's at a weird date and time, being on a Friday instead of a Saturday, if you can make it, I think it's worth the trip. We got Peter Bendix and Skip doing their sit down with Marlins members beginning at 5 p.m. Skip is going to be available to the media. Yeah, we didn't get. Remember last year when Jeff Conine did the announcement about the Flashback Fridays in that uniform, they're more upfront about teasing it. So I don't think it's anything quite that bold, because I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen, and we don't have a great clue as to what it could be. But yeah, I guess looking forward to it. People were wondering about whether FanFest would be kind of like a deadline that gets this front office in motion to do something interesting. And I was telling them that no, the front office itself does not care about that. The team's marketing promotions people, they would absolutely love that. They would greatly appreciate something bigger than Christian Bentoncourt trade happening up to this point in the offseason. But for Trey Mancini, I don't think he's going to be there. That's maybe I bet if that maybe there's a push and pull. They're like, could you give him a major league deal so he's on the roster and then we can bring him to FanFest?
Payne Burdick, guys, Payne Burdick.
But because he's a non-roster invitee, I don't
still?
think that one's still not. That one's still not official yet, even the Mancini one. So I don't think he's going to be there as well. But there's something small to look forward to, and we already put it up on the site. Let me see if I have there. Kevin Barral wrote his FanFest guide article for people that want to read that on fishonfirst.com. And he mentioned at the bottom that we're going to be giving away Caribbean Series tickets at FanFest for people that do this little contest with us. So if you find Kevin, you find Isaac Azu, they're going to be there and just play this little game show that they're doing, and they'll give you free Caribbean Series tickets because that's coming up at Lone Depot Park next week. So yeah, we want to get a combo of people that already know us doing that, and also want to meet some new people, of course, to take advantage of that as well while they're in the neighborhood.
All right, you could do all that. I think this is perfect time to end it there. You can see Loud Marlins fans. If you find him, he will personally autograph his hat and give it to you. So go a bunch of. He will personally sign it with you free of charge. Please go see LMF. But from that, we're gonna have a bunch of people there for FanFest. It's gonna be a great time. But for this FOF Live presented by Burger and Hicks, I'm Daniel, Eli, Callie for Noah, who joined us. Again, FOF Live, Burger and Hicks. Always go fish.